What is going on, everybody? It's sick. It's quick. It's always a flick over here at the Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy NFL Draft Profile breakdowns. A lot of players, of course, that we are talking who have been connected to the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least we think should be connected to the Pittsburgh Steelers as we get closer to the 2024 NFL Draft. I'm Mike Nicastro, host of the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy. You can find me on X, doing a bunch of other things as well. Make sure you check all those things out, like and subscribe this podcast. And we're excited to break down some wide receivers today. One specifically that I think Steelers fans would be delighted if he fell to Pittsburgh, because this is a room now that has been depleted a bit after the Deontay Johnson trade. You kind of have George Pickens standing there like Will Smith at the end of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, looking around with nothing around him. So let's get into it in 1 minute here. Sammy, go ahead and run it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Flacco Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
I don't know how this guy has a voice anymore with all the draft profiles he's done. He's been on Adam Ranks. I know he's done some with the Titans or getting ready to do some. So just probably about a 50 prospect radius out there. You can check these out. So we're happy to have his perspective on a good amount for us as well. It's none other than John Vogel. John, how are we feeling today?
Good. And as for your estimation here of my voice and consideration, which is very kind of you to mention, to think of my voice, and my voice, it manages itself very well. We could talk ball all day, and we're good.
Well, you're in Tennessee, right? It's a little cold there these days. Maybe
no, it's warmed back up. Thank God.
Nice. Finally, we're getting closer into spring here. Can't believe how quickly time goes, and obviously the NFL draft is approaching quickly, and we're all very happy about that. I want to talk receiver with you today. This is a player who I mentioned in the lead up that I think Steelers fans would be very excited if he dropped to them. This draft, I keep looking at it, and every time I run through it, and you probably too, we got a lot of quarterbacks. We have a lot of offensive linemen. You mentioned in our draft series, maybe a couple edges and some corners going before pick 20. I want to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. today. I'll ask you first for a scouting report on this kid.
Yeah, this is a very intriguing prospect because he's 6'3", he's 210, he ran a 4.3 40-yard dash, ran 4.33 at the combine, 38.5-inch vertical. I mean, you want to talk about explosive and fast, that's Brian Thomas Jr. Really exploded on the scene this past year, stepping up as the number 2 option in the LSU offense next to Malik Neighbors. Now, his frame and his skill set would suggest he could be a number 1 wide receiver on a team somewhere. His athletic profile makes him very difficult to match up immediately in the league. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff to work with here with just the pure speed, the pure explosive ability that he has. He's got some decent hands. Now, drop rate's a little bit high. It's hovered over 9%, around 9% over his career. He did get that down to 16.8% or 6.8% last year, which is 5 drops. So it's not terribly concerning, but it is a little bit of an issue. You want to keep an eye on that. But in terms of being a route runner, positioning himself, getting through his breaks, he's pretty good at all that as well. Smooth, efficient route runner that gets the job done, gets deep threat ability, and he's fun. I liked him a lot when I watched him.
We always like to talk about how he complements, of course, another receiver who we think sky's the limit still, George Pickens. Do you think he's a good complement for George?
He definitely could be, because George is another one of these testers, right? That was just this. I can't remember if he was injured and didn't test or what, but you knew he was going to blow testing out of the water because he's just that type of an athlete. We've seen him continue to do that at the next level. I think that they're eerily similar players in a sense, in their build, the way that they want to play the game, the way that they want to play the receiver position. So with a lot of teams wanting to, move guys around and have them play a lot of different roles, especially at the wide receiver position, playing the 1, playing the 2, playing the slot, playing, just moving around the formation. Brian Thomas would give you about the same type of skill set I think that Pickens has, so Thomas probably compares a little bit better to Denzel Mims, who didn't have a great NFL career, but injuries had a lot to do with that, a lot of different things, outside of football. But he's that big-bodied type wide receiver that's going to win some contested catches and bring some physical presence, a lot like Pickens does. So, yeah, they could complement each other well, especially if you want to have an offense where you can rotate guys around and kind of have them play positionless in a sense.
I want to remind everybody that these draft profiles are recorded in advance. There have been some talks about the Steelers potentially trading for a receiver because, as I mentioned, that position needs some upgrades. Brandon Ayuk has been a name thrown out there. So obviously, if something like this happens, Steelers are very unlikely to take a receiver early in the draft. However, if it doesn't, John, is Brian Thomas Jr. a run up to the podium and turn in the card guy for Pittsburgh?
I think there's a lot of options away at 20, especially seeing how the offensive line falls, seeing who's still on the board overall. But offensive line, I think, is the first thing you want to address because, the big thing the number one thing on your offense is outside your quarterback is your offensive line. And Jim Harbaugh had a really, really good point that he made at the owners' meetings a couple weeks ago where he talked about the offensive line is the only position group on the team that doesn't rely on anybody else to be good, but everyone else relies on to be good. That's all. That's what the offensive line is. So you want to get that repaired as soon as you can, especially when you feel like you have a quarterback, you have 2 quarterbacks that you could build around and run that offense. So you want to keep them protected, and you want to make sure that they can get their part of their job done. Now, if you have a lot of wide offensive tackles, if they came off the board faster than you were anticipating, you're kind of down, limited on your options, then yeah, I would definitely take a good hard look at the receivers left on the board, and Brian Thomas would definitely be a guy that could be a really good pick for the Steelers.
You heard it here first. Tremendous breakdown from our guy at SickPod NFL Draft, at Draft Vogel, contributing to a number of draft platforms, and he does it all. He's even a girl dad. How's that been?
And I already kicked her out of the room once while we've been doing this. Just hey,
how old is she?
Working here? She'll be 5 in August, man. Wow. It's nuts. Yeah.
Is she walking in yet, being like, "Dad, tell me a little bit more about Chris Braswell"?
No. She'll watch. So she'll sit down. She'll watch some Tua, Mike. She loves Tua Tagovailoa.
That's cool.
Has since she was a little kid. Just drawing the TV, whatever it is.
Love it. That's awesome, man. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you haven't watched any of our draft profiles, make sure to check out at SickPod Steelers and at SickPod NFL Draft. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.